Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 182 of Chalk Talk. I am your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Shane and I did a watch along of the Eagles game yesterday, which was a fun way to watch a pretty fun game, mostly for the Eagles, obviously. It's a pretty good win there, 2 touchdowns, and it could have been way more. Dog walking on both sides of the ball. So been a good morning perusing Twitter, obviously, on Victory Monday for the 10th straight time, a franchise record. But we're here to talk about the other stuff.
We are here to talk about the other stuff, but you are right. That was a fun game. It kind of puts to bed a lot of the narratives, we'll say, about some of the Eagles' offense this season. But we, as we always do on this Monday show, we're going to throw it around the division, talk about the divisional opponents, and then we'll talk about the rest of the league as well. And I will admit up front, I'm a little less prepared than normal this week doing the watch along for the Eagles game. And we had a Christmas party right after church yesterday, and so I missed the early games. And so I got through as much as I can, but I also had my kids' talent show at the school. So Mark is going to be carrying me like Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were carrying the Eagles offense yesterday. But let's go ahead and dive in, and we'll start, as we always do, with the divisional slate. Let's go to Carolina, where the Dallas Cowboys beat the Carolina Panthers 30-14. And the Panthers were coming off of a hot streak, in air quotes, where they lost by 3 to the Chiefs, 3 to the Bucks, and then 6 to the Eagles, which does tell you a lot about this team, that's a hot streak, but a lot of things for Panthers fans to feel good about. And they were actually favored in this game, and it didn't turn out well. They got dominated by the Cowboys. Bryce Young turned the ball over 4 times. He had 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles. He missed throws. He was running for his life. He got sacked 6 times in the second half, as Dallas allowed only 235 yards of offense, and 83 of that came on one play with a busted coverage. So rough game for Bryce Young and the Panthers. I don't think this should be a referendum on Bryce Young. He's played really well over the last several weeks and had a tough game against a defense that, let's be honest, when they're hot, they're good. We expected Dallas to have a good defense this year, and they came to play in this game. But I think the big thing to talk about for Dallas from a divisional opponent perspective is, there's been a lot of talk about they're going to have a high draft pick. What are they going to do with it? There's a certain collegiate running back who may or may not have been robbed of the Heisman Trophy that might have been linked to Dallas a time or two. And I think what Rico Dowdle's doing over the last month of the season is going to save the Cowboys from making a destructive pick, because I absolutely think that's the type of thing that Jerry Jones would do. Okay, you made the facial reaction. I don't mean destructive in that Ashton Genty's not worth a high pick. I just mean that that's not what the Cowboys should do. But Rico Dowdle in this game, 149 yards on 25 carries. He became the first UDFA with 3 straight 100-yard games since 2014 when Arian Foster did it. And if you look back, since week 9, only Saquon Barkley has rushed for more yards than Rico Dowdle. And so they're obviously leaning on him more with Cooper Rush at quarterback, but Dowdle's been really good. And so I think that's the big takeaway here for the Cowboys, is that they might have their running back for the next several years.
Well, as of today, they are the 14th pick. Obviously, Falcons are 6-7, so that could change some things, and it could still shuffle around a bit. But they're probably going to be somewhere between. I think their ceiling is the 10th pick at this point. Looking at how the 9th pick has 4 wins, it's still, and their basement's probably somewhere around 17. So they're going to be picking in the mid part of the draft, which I think after the start to the season that they have and the amount of holes that I think that they're going to have and already have on that roster that are just going to kind of multiply in the offseason, I think you have to feel good about them. What is it, 4 of 5 now that they've won? 3 of 4? Something like that at this point. They definitely have won a nice streak of games here, and that has ultimately killed their pick more than anything else. And Is it fair? So the Gentry conversation, I think, is interesting. Since you brought it up, last week we used the Giants as an avenue to talk about Travis Hunter. This week we used the Cowboys as an avenue to talk about Ashton Gentry. So Ashton Gentry, do you think he's going to be worth a blank pick? Like where is it in the draft that you would say it's acceptable to look at an elite running back prospect?
I think, man, so we've seen the league swing back to, running game matters because defenses are committing even more to stop the pass. And I think it depends on the team. Like if you didn't think the Cowboys had a lot of holes and you look at the roster and let's just say they could bring most of the team back last year and you tell yourself we're only going to be picking 9th or whatever, because Dak got hurt and he's the finishing piece to get us to a Super Bowl. Well, then I think it's feasible to take him up that high. I don't think a team that needs a lot more pieces. I should have had the tankathon up, but I don't think a team like the I don't know, insert team here. A bad team should not take him as high as maybe a good team that had a bad season because your quarterback got injured or whatever. And so it's hard for me to set a specific value. If the Titans take Gentry, that's a disaster because you don't have a quarterback and you've got all of these holes and, all of these things. But if you look at a team like the Bengals, well, the Bengals defense is a disaster. So you probably need to look there. But if you say a team like the Bengals, which is maybe not the best example because their offense is still unbelievable. They just
Chase Brown's really stepped into a role there too.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying, if you think he's the finishing piece and you find yourself with a top pick, I'm more likely to accept that from a top 10 team than I am a team that has no business taking a running back at 10. So I think it's fine if he goes top 10, if it was to the right team. I just don't know that there's a team that's going to be in the top 10 that I feel like them taking a running back is really acceptable. The only team that's slated to draft top 10 that has their quarterback, the Patriots, but they got a lot more problems. The Jags, they probably have a lot more problems, and the Bears.
And Carolina's probably going to stick with Bryce even after this game, I think.
Yeah, but they've got a lot more problems. So the Bears, but then you look at the Bears and it's man, you got DJ Moore that you traded. Basically, you put a first-round pick value on. You just drafted Rome Odunze in the first round. Are we really going to spend a top 10 pick on a running back? I don't know that that's smart. Maybe they do it. I don't know, but I think
it's interesting.
I think he's going to be a game changer for whoever gets him, and he's worth a top 10 pick, but I don't think many teams in the top 10 should be considering him.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting. And on top of that, a lot of news in the college quarterback world today in the transfer portal, or not transfer portal, in terms of them coming back. Drew Aller, who was projected to maybe be a late day one, maybe a day 2 guy, going back to Penn State. Garrett Nussmeier going back to LSU. And then there was rumors that apparently Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers leaning back to going back to school. Which the Ewers thing is crazy because I don't know what that does to Arch Manning. That's a whole other podcast. But if you look at Tankathon and the quarterback prospects that they have Shador and Cam Ward projected as first-round picks. And after that list of names potentially all going back, Milroe would be the only other top 100 quarterback, and I don't think he ends up as a first-round pick. So I think that this probably means Shador and Cam Ward get pushed up to the top of the board, even if they're not top of the board quarterbacks. And then after that, if anyone wants offensive pieces that aren't Ted McMillan or Travis Hunter, it's going to be interesting to see where Gentry gets slotted in, because I do think there's a chance, Carolina's picking 7, that they maybe take a look at Gentry. I think there's a chance that maybe Tennessee would take a look. I probably wouldn't if I were those teams. The Jets, no, they wouldn't. Chicago, it depends who's there. I think you probably need to do some work on the O-line more than anything else when it comes to that, but I think it's probably up for debate. New Orleans shouldn't, Miami shouldn't, Indy shouldn't, Cincy shouldn't, Dallas shouldn't, San Fran shouldn't, Atlanta has Bijan. That's where it's going to be interesting.
Who they shouldn't have taken.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting. Maybe Arizona They have an aging James Conner. There's not a lot of spots that make a ton of sense for Genty.
The Chargers would love him. Harbaugh would love to get a back they can hand the ball to 30 times a game. But
I don't think Genty's falling to 19. Though.
I don't either. That's
where it's interesting. It's really interesting. And I think we can get into some of the more of the quarterback conversation when we get to the Giants.
Yeah. Joe Ciccoletti chiming in saying, good afternoon. I think only a few teams would take him in the first. The Bengals, the Cowboys, the Chargers. I think all teams ahead need much more. And yeah, it's where you start to weigh out how you, because he's going to be a clean prospect that I'm going to have probably a top 5 player grade on. But then you get into the value proposition and how you rank other players. And so it'll become interesting to see where he slots in. But
I think he's I think he's a considerably better prospect than Bijan Robinson was. And I know everyone said Bijan Robinson was generational. You remember doing the shows with me at the time. I had him and Jahmyr Gibbs pretty much dead even in my rankings. I wasn't as sold that I thought Bijan was good. And I think Bijan's been very good, actually. I think there's some people who would say he's been disappointing. I think Bijan's been a top probably 8 running back since he's been in the league. Maybe a little higher number than that, but it's just hard for me to know where Genty's going to be slotted in because we have seen Bijan and Gibbs get pushed up in the draft pretty recently, and Genty's, I think, a better prospect than either of them. So that's where it gets interesting. I would say watch out for Carolina. That's all I'll say. I do think that they have a linebacker GM. He's probably less inclined to care about positional value. I think Genty, if you made me guess on the hot seat right now, I think he's a Panther.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it. The early call out here from Mark. Kev says that Raiders could pick up a quarterback and draft him. So we've got a Raiders and we've got a Panthers call out. We'll see where he ends up, but let's keep rolling on here. Somehow we're doing a college player thing every week at the top of the show, but
it's not our fault the Cowboys and Giants stink.
That is true. That is very true. So let's get into the division team that doesn't stink. The Washington Commanders. They go to the Superdome and they squeak this one out 20-19 in a game where Jaden Daniels completed 80% of his passes for 226 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was the team's leading rusher with 11 carries for 66 yards, but Washington only put up 20 points, and they barely won the game despite leading 17-0 in the third quarter. The Saints' first half was a disaster. They went to Spencer Rattler at halftime, who should have been the starter the whole time. It doesn't make any sense. Your season's over. Play the rookie you drafted. But Spencer Rattler led 4 straight scoring drives. Now, his passing numbers weren't great, but you could tell it injected some life into the offense. And there's something to be said for going from shutout to 4 straight drives, regardless of what the quarterback stats look like. So we get to the end of the game. The Saints score on the last play of the game after a 4th and 3 conversion and then spiking the ball to stop the clock with 4 seconds left. They score the touchdown. They opt for 2 to go for 2 to win it instead of taking it to overtime. And I hated that decision. When you're on a 19-3 scoring run, I feel like you feel pretty good about going to overtime in your home stadium. I like the huge underdog going for 2. I'm all for that, but maybe not when you've got all the momentum in the world. But regardless, it doesn't work out for them, and Washington survives. And technically, they keep their division hopes alive, although they need a lot of help. They get a chance to help themselves this week against the Eagles, but Jaden Daniels was sacked 8 times in this game. That's been a little bit of a theme. The Washington O-line hasn't held up as well as I think Washington fans would have hoped. But what's your takeaway from this game?
Yeah, not only that, and Brian Johnson, 21 carries for 65 yards too. So they weren't blocking well in the run game. Jaden Daniels picked up 66 yards, but I'd say that's probably less about the O-line and more about Jaden Daniels. I would say the Commanders O-line has a serious problem. The Commanders have serious problems in general. I mean, this is a joke that this game was at all close. It was 17-0, and you let them back in. And this game, even at the end, they made a pretty dumb decision. I'd have to see I want to see the exact amount of time. So they decided to take a field goal up 7 with 2 minutes, right after the 2-minute warning, 4th and 16 on New Orleans 36. They take a 54-yarder. That's kind of the exact situation Sirianni, I guess, punted out of last week, except he was up 6, whereas the Commanders were up 7. Is that the right call? 4th and 16 on the 36, taking the field goal with 2 minutes left when it's against Spencer Rattler. Should you just punt it away in that scenario and try to pin them, or is it not worth the potential risk of a touchback? I in the moment, I felt like it was weird that they were taking a field goal, but then I also kind of criticized Sirianni for punting in that situation last week. So I realized I was being inconsistent. What would you have done in that spot?
It depends on how you feel about your kicker, but considering they're not on their starting kicker right now, and their new kicker is 0 of 1 from 50 plus and 3 of 4 from 40 to 49 yards, I probably would punt that away there and make them go the whole field. But generally, I'm going to try that 54-yard field goal. I'm just not sure that I would do it with a backup kicker.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. Maybe that's part of it. And yeah, I did feel at the time like, man, that's risky. And then it ended up almost costing them the game.
I generally am a fan of like, hey, let's go try to end the game right here. And if we don't, we can still trust our defense to hold them out of the end zone. Because I feel like teams tend to get conservative. Like you pin them down inside the 10, and you're like, now let's just kind of play conservative, and you give up the field goal positioning in like 3 plays anyways.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not that impactful. So I get why the Eagles did it. I understand why they did it. And I think those are probably 2 scenarios where I'm kind of okay with it.
I did think Jaden was awesome in this game, by the way. Like there were some issues with the offense getting stagnant. I didn't think those were his issues. They couldn't run it, and the O-line was giving up sacks, taking holding calls. Like I thought it was all O-line related and anything but Jaden. He's had a couple games in a row now where he had a little stretch, obviously, in the middle of the year where I started to be like, man, are we kind of hitting a rookie wall? And maybe this is kind of we're not going to ever see that first 6 to 8 weeks Jaden Daniels that we kind of saw ever again. I don't think that's the case. I think he's going to be pretty good for a while.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep rolling to the New York Giants, who lose to the Baltimore Ravens 35-14. This was a slow start for the Ravens. That Lamar fumbles on their first drive. They punted on a 4th and 1 from the Giants 49 on the second drive, which I hate that decision. I pretty much always hate punting on 4th and 1, but then their offense caught fire with 5 straight touchdown drives. And notable one is Devontae Walker had his first NFL reception, and it was a 21-yard touchdown. So that's always nice. Catch your first pass in the end zone. For the Giants, Tommy DeVito sustained a concussion in this game, and so Tim Boyle came in and played. Tyrone Tracy only rushed for 31 yards in the game. Malik Neighbors did have 10 catches for 82 yards and a penalty, but not much entertaining for Giants fans to watch here. I did find this interesting, Mark. The Baltimore Ravens had 12 penalties for 112 yards in this game. They have had either double-digit penalties or triple-digit penalty yardage in 4 of their last 5 games.
Wow.
The lone exception, obviously, being against the Eagles, where they suddenly played clean and only had 4 penalties for 20 yards. But I digress.
That's why you love that stat. That's why I knew where that stat was going right away.
Yeah. I also I digress. Other call out from this game: Lamar Jackson had his 6th career game with 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He trails 2 quarterbacks who have 8 of those each. Who do you think those quarterbacks are? 5 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Oh, okay. So I saw a different stat that I'll throw at you after this, but 2 quarterbacks who have never done that. Aaron Rodgers?
No, sorry. So the 2 quarterbacks who have done it more than Lamar. Lamar's done it 6 times. 2 other quarterbacks have done it 8 times each.
I'm guessing Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, no, it is not. It's not Aaron Rodgers.
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady's 1.
Peyton?
Nope.
Breeze?
Tom Brady and Drew Brees each did it 8 times. So Lamar's done it 6 times now.
I knew it had to be like a longevity guy from that era, probably. I was going to go Rivers next, actually.
Rodgers would have been one of my guesses. I would have guessed Brady Rodgers. I probably would not have thought of Brees.
I have another stat about similar that I thought you were throwing at me, and then it had a different one from Trey Wingo. This was Lamar's 5th game with 5 touchdown passes and 5 or fewer incompletions. No other player in NFL history has more than 3.
That's crazy.
That is an insane stat. And he's also, He has a 923 win percentage against the NFC now in his career. Lamar just wins. And by the way, I get it. Josh Allen, whoop-de-doo. He puts up like 50 points 2 weeks in a row. La-di-da. Lamar Jackson has 200 more passing yards than Josh Allen, 9 more touchdowns passing, 2 less interceptions, and 300 more rushing yards. Joe Chick says, why does Lamar not get his flowers, and how is Allen minus 900? Lamar has better stats except rushing touchdowns. Because people don't like Lamar Jackson.
Because every individual award in the sport is a joke.
I totally agree. The fact that Saquon kind of pushed Lamar out of the MVP conversation, in my opinion, was always dumb. I think you look at Lamar, he clearly is having the best year among anybody. Josh Allen's having the best little stretch here the last couple games, and he's had big wins against Kansas City and against Detroit on national television. Guess what happened when Lamar and Josh Allen played each other? The Ravens won, and they won like 35-10. So it is frustrating to me that's the case. But 2 more wins, I think, right? Buffalo has 11 wins.
Yeah.
That's what it is, as dumb as that is.
Yeah. I refuse to give much airtime to award stuff because I think it's all dumb anyways. But yeah. I refuse to get worked up about it. We've done the whole thing, Coach. I just whatever. I think they're all dumb.
So the one thing I'll say is, I would be more worked up about it if Josh Allen hadn't done what he did the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, he's been otherworldly. I think he's had like 750 yards. I think he has, obviously 2 weeks in a row, he put up like 44 and 48 points. He's been so good the last 2 weeks. He was the MVP favorite before that, like convincingly, after the game where he had like 160 yards against the Niners on Sunday Night Football. I think it was the Niners, but it was something like that. He was the favorite after that game. I'd be more outraged if he continued to go, if he had like 200 yards and put up like 28 points in each of the last 2 weeks. I think he'd still be the favorite if that was the case. But the fact that he has went so berserk the last 2 weeks, it makes me back off a little bit, even though I think Lamar should still be the MVP.
Yeah. Had another comment coming in from Twitter asking about Quignon for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's pretty much like neck and neck with Jared Verse now. But
yeah, he should win it. I still have questions about, if you will. And then the other side of this game to finish it off is the Giants and the quarterback. Right now, if the Giants lose out, they will get the number 1 pick. I guess how it works is even if the Raiders lose out as well, they will have the advantage over them. So it looks like Shedeur Sanders, probably a Giant.
All right. This might get old takes exposed later, but I hope that's what happens because
I would rather them get Cam Ward.
Sure. I would rather them have Cam Ward than Shedeur Sanders, but I feel like that's kind of a.
Would we? Yeah, it's interesting because I don't love either prospect. I especially don't really think Cam Ward is a real legit first-round pick NFL quarterback, and I think he will go there. But when it comes to Shedeur, if I think he's like the 16th best prospect this probable year, and I have questions about his leadership and stuff like that, but I be more scared of the Giants getting him just because I think he does have clear upside, or would I be more scared of the Giants kind of staying in the wilderness on quarterback and having to sign some free agent and kind of going at it again the next year? I don't know. I kind of think I would kind of like them to stink again next year with no plan. I think that's fun.
Yeah, I would love. I mean, if I would rather punt that first round draft pick to next year and just see. But of course, it's hard to thread that needle to be bad enough the next year. So, who knows? Maybe they'll go sign Sam Darnold.
Allegedly, they're not. That'd be funny. Allegedly, they're not firing Joe Shane, is what they're putting out there. And I actually believe that they won't fire Dable. Shane's the crazy one. If you don't fire Shane, I don't know how a GM gets fired, to be honest. But
yeah,
if he doesn't get fired, he will be drafting a quarterback. Like there's no.
Yeah, it's the last desperation move.
Yeah,
which is why you don't keep a guy on the hot seat like that. But
absolutely.
All right, let's get into the rest of the Sunday slate. Kansas City at Cleveland. Kansas City wins 21-7. The Chiefs fumbled 2 times in this game, but they recovered both fumbles. The Browns fumbled 3 times and they lost 2 of the 3. Jameis Winston also threw 3 interceptions before being benched for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who also threw an interception. You're just not going to win many games when you're -6 in the turnover margin. And so Mahomes gets injured in this game and Carson Wentz has to come in. And I don't know. It looks bad. I feel like this happens like every year with Mahomes around this time of the year, and he's always fine. And that doesn't mean he will be this time, but I just kind of feel like he will because the Chiefs kind of feel indestructible in a way. But the Chiefs' offense is just dreadful. Like, it's so bad to watch. Mahomes was 19 of 38. He threw 38 passes for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. They ran for under 3 yards a carry. Their offense is bad. And maybe their defense is obviously really good, but their offense is so bad. And again, until they don't make a Super Bowl, I will not pick them not to be there. But it just feels painful watching Chiefs games.
I actually think that this was just, they got up so early, so fast, and then they kind of just sat on it. And Jameis kept making mistakes. I keep saying I'm not worried. Yeah. I really don't think that they concern me at all. And obviously the injury changes that. They did just come out and say it's a mild high ankle sprain. Ian Rappaport said, a source said he'll be fine long-term. He's week to week, so his status this week is in doubt. The interesting thing here is, and we'll talk about it, but the Colts and the Dolphins both lost. So the Chiefs, their last game is against the Broncos. The Broncos are, they're now, if you win one game, if you're the Broncos of the next 2, you're basically clinched. They're probably not going to be playing for anything in week 18. The Broncos might be resting guys. So the Chiefs, if they need to play and make, to get that 1 seed, I think that's why they might be a little bit cautious with Mahomes these next 2 weeks, because you basically need to go 2-1. And that's assuming that, that Buffalo goes 3-0, which is not necessarily like, that they play. I guess they have a really easy schedule down the stretch here, but they could easily drop a game. I would say the Chiefs are probably going to sit Mahomes this week against the Texans, try to win at home against, I think, a pretty mediocre Texans team, which right now that spread is Houston -2.5 with Carson Wentz, I guess, assumed in. But I think he'll be back on Christmas on Netflix.
Yeah, you got the stupid little run here with 3 games in 10 days because we got to have a Wednesday game. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out down the stretch because Denver, I think their magic number is 1 to clinch a playoff spot. Yep. But they might be in a position where, if they beat the Chiefs in week 18, they could avoid playing the Chiefs in the playoffs. Or, so they might have some matchup things where it's like, we kind of get a crack to win this game to improve our seeding. So we get to play a team we want to match. So you never know how that's going to shake out, but we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing, how it plays out down the stretch.
With the Chargers losing and with the fact that you have the Steelers, who we'll get to that, but they're a 6.5-point dog at Baltimore this next coming week. So Vegas not giving them much of a chance there. Baltimore wins that game and takes the division away, and you have the Steelers then having to turn around and play in Kansas City. There's a good chance we're getting a playoff game, the 4-seed Houston Texans playing the 5-seed Denver Broncos. With that Chargers loss to Tampa yesterday, like I do think there's a chance that Denver is the 5-seed, which is just wild, and that is an ugly, ugly playoff game.
Yeah. Well, let's get to Houston. The Texans play the Miami Dolphins, and they win 20-12. They led 13-6, and they ran a fake punt that went for 35 yards. And the running back actually fumbled at the end of the play, but an unnecessary roughness penalty kept the ball with the Texans, and they scored 2 plays later to pretty well seal that game. Derek Stingley intercepted Tua twice while he was targeting Tyreek Hill, the last one of which he took away from Hill on the sideline that basically sealed the game. And Stingley was targeted 10 times in this game, which is the most since his rookie season. He allowed only 30 yards and had 2 picks. Tua throws 3 interceptions, and he lost a fumble. Bad stuff in Miami. Not great stuff in Houston either. The Texans had no run game. Like, if you remove the fake punt run and a 15-yard end around. They had 18 carries for 27 yards, and CJ Stroud threw for 131 yards. So bad offensive performance on both sides of the ball, but Houston wins, and I think that pretty well almost eliminates Miami from playoff. Like, I think they have to win out and have several teams lose out at this point.
Yeah, there's an argument if you're Baltimore or Pittsburgh that you're better off being the 5 seed than the 3 seed, like, and going to Houston. I think this Houston team stinks. They won this game getting 181 total yards. They won this game because Tua stunk. Tua lost this game flat out for the Dolphins. So great day for Shane Haft's Tua takes over the years. I'm starting. I've kind of always been one of those guys who defends, I would say, like QB 14 through 20, being like, well, there has to be 32. And, these guys are clearly starting quarterbacks. I don't know if it's this year or what it is about me. Maybe I'm getting older. I am starting to be like, man, I think you've probably got to make decisions on these guys to move on from them. And it's too late with the Dolphins and Tua now. And you're kind of stuck in that. And we're going to talk about another guy a little bit later on who I think you're going to be shocked to hear me say it about. But we'll get there. I think the Dolphins thing is done. The Tua thing is done. And I don't think they can do anything about it.
Having QB 16 is fine when you're not paying him like QB 2.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine when he's on a rookie deal, but yeah, you look at the Tua contract right now. They have $83 million of dead cap tied up around Tua after this season. So like, there's no move to be made. Like, the earliest they can reasonably get out of this deal would be after another season. Your coach is gonna get fired as the whole deal. Tyreek Hill, like they would have been better off to try to move on and to try to trade Tyreek Hill and rebuild. But again, you've got a coach that is on a hot seat, probably being involved in decision-making. And that's why you should just never have a coach that's on a hot seat. If they're on a hot seat, it's time to move on.
Do you think he's on a hot seat right now? Like, do you think he's going to get fired this year?
Yeah, I do.
Really?
I think he'll get, if he doesn't get fired after this season, he'll get fired after next season. Like when they paid Tua, they made the decision to fire Mike McDaniel 1 to 2 years down the road because it was never going to work out.
I'll tell you what, I think it'd be a mistake to fire him this year. I still think he's a pretty good coach. I think they have problems, but I don't think that they're really McDaniel related. I
need to see McDaniel run an offense that is not based around Tua before I make a final distinction, because I just think he's such a limiting player.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
But you're not going to get that because you tethered your franchise wagon to Tua. And so you got to probably move on from McDaniel and see if somebody can make it work with Tua.
I'd be surprised if he's fired this year.
Yeah, maybe not. I guess we'll see. But again, that's just that. Like when they signed that contract, my immediate thought was McDaniel's gone in the next 2 years.
I agree with that. I think he's probably fired after next year.
So, all right, let's keep rolling to a game that I had no eyes on and I didn't make it to, Mark. But do you have anything you want to shout out in the Jets' victory over the Jaguars? It's 32-25. Both teams out of playoff contention. So I had to prioritize. This is one of 3 games I didn't get to today.
The Jets are totally going to bring Aaron Rodgers back. He looked pretty good in this game. And there's some numbers out there that since the bye, I guess he's been a lot better and all this stuff. That's so funny. It's very funny. But what I will say, as someone who had Jags plus 3.5 in this game, miserable gambling loss. The Jets score with 3 minutes and 24 seconds left to go up 3. They hit the 2-point conversion. I should say they score to go up 1. They hit. So let's erase this. Bad premise by me. I have plus 3.5. I'm up 5 with 4 minutes to go. The Jets are on like their own 20. You're feeling pretty good. The Jets have to score twice. There's 4 minutes left. They get a 71-yard touchdown to Devontae Adams to take the lead. They go up by 1. Then they get the 2-point conversion to go up by 3. Even with that, you're feeling pretty good. Just no overtime. Don't go tie the game, Jacksonville. And what does Jacksonville do? They march right down the field. They tie the game, 25-25, a minute 51 left. And it's like, all right, well, if the Jets are going to go down the field, they probably won't score a touchdown. There's a minute and 51 seconds left. Like, just get a field goal. The Jets get like a 60-yard play down to the 1-yard line. And instead of kneeing on it and sitting on the ball to not give Jacksonville the ball back, they just run a 1-yard run and score with a minute left to hand Jacksonville the ball back down 7 with a minute left. Instead of wasting any clock, instead of doing anything. It was insane. It looked like the NFL was rigged against people who had Jags plus 3.5. That was like there was some point shaving going on in that game in some capacity. It was insane. I've never seen anything like that. I can't believe that they didn't just sit on the ball.
We are sorry for your loss there.
Unbelievable. And I had a great day. You were with me during the 4:00 slate. I hit every single bet. I told all the listeners, go bet the Packers tonight. They're going to kill the Seahawks. I had like a plus 7 unit day. Would have been a plus like 15 unit day if the Jags just don't blow it with a minute left and tie the game. Unbelievable.
All right. Well, let's move on to Tennessee. And this is one of the other of the 3 games I didn't have eyes on, Mark, but the Titans lose to the Bengals 37-27. Maybe bad podcasting by me to stack these two up back. But what do you have? Do you have anything on this game you want to shout out?
I think Zach Taylor's going to get fired.
Yeah.
I didn't think it until this week. You see Joe Burrow on the sideline at the end of the game. It's 37-21, and you can read his lips, and he's like saying it's unbleeping acceptable. This game is effing embarrassing, as they're up 16 at the end of the 4th quarter. And Zach Taylor's like shaking his head like, no, it was good. Like, you can see he said, no, we were good, or no, it was good. Like, and Joe Burrow's like, no, it wasn't. Like, we were not good enough. And I guess they had some turnovers. I think Joe Burrow is just very clearly extremely frustrated with how the season has went. And I think he probably in the past has been a supporter of Zach Taylor. Don't think that's the case this offseason when it comes down to going to ask your franchise player if they should keep the coach or not. I think he's fed up.
Yeah, Zach Taylor better get him a Rolex or something for Christmas. Get him something nice.
Seriously, I think it's Burrow making that call.
Yeah. Although, I mean, the defense is the issue here. Like, the offense has not been the problem for Cincinnati this year. And it's crazy that it's Anarumo, right? Lou Anarumo.
He's going to be gone.
Yeah. And like a few years ago, it was like he should be a head coach. And he's been kneecapped every step of the way. It's like, hey, find these guys, develop them, and then we'll not pay them because you can do it again. And it feels like that luck finally ran out. I still think he's a very good defensive coach. I just think he's got almost nothing to work with right now.
They struck out on a couple high picks too, like Daxton Hill. That didn't work out in the secondary. Miles Murphy hasn't been able to stay healthy at all. Yeah. They've had a couple picks at the defense that they tried to supplement some losses, like losing Jesse Bates, losing was it Geno Stone, or they've lost a couple pieces throughout that defense, and they're just not the same team at all anymore defensively.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the afternoon slate where I have done some of my homework again, Mark. New England at Arizona. Arizona wins 30-17, and the Cardinals' playoff hopes stay alive as they improve to 7-7. It's on life support, but it's still alive. James Conner rushed for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kyler Murray was 23 of 30 for 224 yards. But Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray just have not connected this season. We talked about how good a receiving prospect Harrison was, and I believe that still, but he's 4th in rookie receiving yards at 655, which doesn't sound bad, but for the hype that he was getting and the fact he's playing with Kyler, he didn't get drafted into oblivion. He's 4th in receiving yards, and among the 11 wide receivers who have been targeted 35 times, he is 10th in catch rate. They're just not connecting, and that's a huge thing to watch going forward with their offense, because I don't know why these guys haven't been able to get on the same page. And on the Patriots side, Drake May was 19 of 23 passing for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did throw an interception for the second week in a row. That interception hit a receiver in the hands, and the receiver didn't catch it, and it bounced off his body and got intercepted. Like, these are open throws. These aren't like it was a jump ball and the defender won at the catch point. He's hitting open guys. Like, if you take away those 2 interceptions in the last 2 games, both of which hit an open receiver in the hands, Drake May has a completion percentage of 81% over the last 2 games with a passer rating of 113.8. And that is with no help, no running game, no offensive line, no wide receivers. And I guess I'm mostly saying that to say Drake May is awesome. Like, Drake May has been every bit as impressive as Jaden Daniels this season. And yes, the Patriots stink, but I was lower on Jaden Daniels, and I probably missed on. I mean, I still had him like 15th player overall, but I was probably too low on Jaden Daniels. But dang it, I hit on my Drake May hype. Drake May is going to be awesome for the Patriots. They've just got to build the team around him.
I still think all 3 of Caleb, May, and Daniels are going to be awesome. And I was high on all 3. I had Daniel. I'd have to see where I had Daniels. Maybe I had like 8th or 9th overall, but he was definitely comfortably QB3, whereas Drake May was QB2 and like a top 3 prospect, if not number 2 overall. I'd have to remember. But my take on this game is actually about the other side of the ball. And it's a funny time to do it because they put up 30 points. They won the game. He wasn't bad in the game. I didn't think he was good either. And
timeout. Before you do that, I'll tell you your rankings. You had Caleb Williams 1, Drake May 3, Jaden Daniels 6 overall. Okay. I had Caleb Williams 1, Drake May 3, and then I had Jaden Daniels 15 overall. So that's how we had those. We both had him QB 1, 2, 3, and we both had Williams and May 1 and 3 overall. You had Daniels 6. I had him 15.
I think I bumped him up throughout the process too. I think I probably started with him more around like 10 or 11 and ended up with him around 6. But in terms of the Cardinals Patriots game, the quarterback in the game that worries me is Kyler Murray. And I know they put up 30. I know they won the game. I watch him and I don't feel the same electricity anymore. And he gets out of the pocket and it doesn't feel like he's finding guys on the scramble drill the way he used to be so good at it. Like you said, Marvin Harrison, 47 catches on 92 targets. I don't think that's on Marvin Harrison. And you see it when you watch their games, you do always feel like 1 or 2 times a week they show a replay of just Marvin Harrison wide open. Kyler didn't see it. And it's hard, there's things are cherry picked and it's probably not fair to Kyler. But I do think I'm starting to get to a point where I wonder if the size is like tenable. I think that he might just be a little too small to see everything that he needs to see in terms of a play developing. And if he's not going to be quite as electric outside of the pocket, then I don't know what the upside is with Kyler long term. And you're kind of stuck with him as well. I think if you're Arizona, I just don't know. And they're 7-7. Again, I say this all the time with Gannon. I just don't think you can return next year with Kyler, Gannon, and the same offensive play caller, Andrew Petzing.
Yeah. Got a comment coming in from Daniel. I'll get your take on this, Mark. So Gerard Mayo should not survive the year. Now, I'm not plugged into like what Patriots players are saying and things like that. So culture wise, I don't know, but I will say like, this is the year I expected for the Patriots. They're just terrible. So
fleeting. Like I don't think he should.
I wouldn't have hired him to begin with. I thought it was a terrible hire, but I don't know. I don't know that you get rid of the guy after a year, unless there's like some glaring culture things that maybe people know about and I just don't, because I don't follow the Patriots that closely.
Like they were relatively close in this game for a while. They lost by 1 to the Colts last week. A couple of weeks before that, they lost by 6 to the Rams. They beat the Bears the week before that. They were in overtime the week before that. They won the week before that. Like I think since Drake May's come in, like they haven't been an embarrassing team anymore. Like I don't think they've probably been like a bottom 8 team in the NFL if you look at how many bad teams there are. I think they're exactly what they should be. Like I probably wouldn't have hired Mayo either, but I don't really get what you've seen from him this year that would make them fire him, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's go to Denver. The Broncos beat the Colts 31-13, and Bo Nix threw 3 touchdowns. He also threw 3 interceptions in this game. This is his second straight multi-interception game, and so he had a 10-game stretch with 2 total interceptions. He has 5 in the last 2 games. And so that's something to keep an eye on as you head into the playoffs with the rookie quarterback. But the Broncos defense stepped up. They forced 5 turnovers in this game. Nick Bonito scored a defensive touchdown for the second game in a row. Boomer Sooner. The Colts, we don't get to say that often anymore, but the Colts led this game through 3 quarters. They just fell apart in the fourth. The worst is Jonathan Taylor D-Jacksing a touchdown, dropping the ball before he got into the end zone. I don't understand how a professional athlete can ever do that, but we see it. It seems like once a year. But the Broncos have a magic number of 1 to make the playoffs. Now, they do have a tough stretch. They go at the Chargers. I believe that's the Thursday night game this week, right?
It is.
Yeah, at the Chargers on a short week, at Cincinnati, which we talked about Cincinnati and their problems, but they can put up points, and then versus Kansas City. So, we talked earlier about that Kansas City game. It's also possible they might need that game to make, I don't think it will be. They're going to be in the playoffs. They got like a 91% chance, but their magic number is 1 right now.
They'll be clinched by then. Yeah, it'll just be about if they're not in position to get a 5 seed, I don't think they'll care if they play like the Ravens or Bills. Like if they're going to get a 6 or a 7 and they're in, then I think they won't care about the game. I think Denver, they were lucky to win this game, but they won at 31-13. Like they should have been down 20-7 if Jonathan Taylor doesn't, drop the ball on the 1 yard line and pull a Deshaun Jackson. And then, you go on a run after that. I think that's a huge momentum shifter. I think this game's different if Jonathan Taylor scores that game. But I would say that the story's more about the Colts. Like you're probably stuck with Richardson again next year, but man, there are games like this where it's like, it's tough to watch. He misses some just easy layups. And they did get him going a little bit in the running game, and Steichen kind of said they needed to do that more after the game and saying they need to use him as a weapon. But maybe they bring back Minshew as the backup. Like maybe you feel better about your backup option because that at least got them to 9 wins a year ago. He just broke his collarbone. I think he should be fine for next year, but I don't know what you do, and you're not going to be high enough in the draft to do anything about it in the draft. There's not a ton of options out there in free agency. There's a lot of court teams this year, and you're seeing more bad teams than ever. I can't ever remember looking at Tankathon and seeing 7 teams at 3-11 or worse. There's a lot of teams with terrible quarterback situations, and there's not a lot of options out there to fix them.
Yeah. Sam Darnold's about to make bank.
Who else is there? Someone's going to get Darnold, Shador and Cam Ward.
Yeah.
What else? Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins,
Jameis, who just got benched.
Like there's really not a lot out there. I don't even know Daniel Jones. Anyone?
Yeah.
I don't. Derek Carr, maybe. Probably not. Probably will just be a Saint.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They'll probably restructure his contract and add 4 more years to it.
Yeah.
Because they're real close. Kev says Kenny Pickett.
Don't think so. I don't think he makes it. Maybe Cooper Rush making himself some money here. I don't know, but yeah, man, it is brutal.
All right. Well, let's keep rolling. Let's go to Detroit, where 0 defense was played as the Bills beat the Lions 48-42. And the Bills offense is on fire and their defense sucks. They have scored 42 and 48 points in the last 2 weeks, and they didn't even win both games because they gave up 44 and 42. By the way, they gave up 42 points or 44 points, whatever it was, 44 points to the Rams 2 weeks ago, who scored 12 points on Thursday Night Football. So, the Bills, their offense hasn't scored under 30 points in 8 consecutive games, which is tied for the longest streak in NFL history. With the Patriots next week, I think it's safe to say they will set that record and get to 30 points. But I do have questions about the Bills' defense when you come to the playoffs. It's why it's hard. It'll be the ultimate clash of styles if they play the Chiefs, and their offense against the Chiefs' defense, while the other sides of the ball are just a little bit lackluster. But for the Lions side, man, the Lions just continue to be decimated by injury. They lose Aleem McNeil on Sunday for the season. I think they said it was an ACL. David Montgomery is an MCL. He's out for the season. They lose Carlton Davis for 6 weeks. They're going to have 21 guys on IR after they move these 3 guys. And I think they've just lost too many defensive pieces. Now, this was a game where the Lions couldn't run the ball. They had 13 running back carries for 35 yards. And the narrative around the Lions has been, if you can get in front of them and make them play from behind and eliminate their running game, they can't do it. They did in this one. And it's against a defense that I have a lot of questions about. But Jared Goff became the first quarterback to ever throw for 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions and proceed to lose the game. Previously, quarterbacks who did so were 16-0. Mark, I kind of feel like both of these teams, their defenses are just too bad at this point to be able to make that run in the postseason.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't think that I don't think either of these teams play in the Super Bowl. There was a lot of this could be the Super Bowl. Imagine Detroit and Buffalo fans in New Orleans. I think it's going to be Philly, KC. And to be honest with you, I think if it's not Philly and KC, I think that the teams that'll be there would be Green Bay on the NFC side or Baltimore on the AFC side. I really think that Buffalo defense and Detroit defense are going to kill them. Did you see the David Montgomery news?
Yeah, MCL, right?
Yeah, and they're saying could be season ending. He's going to go get second opinions. That's a big deal, and especially in terms of them trying to salt games away. They're not going to be able to just keep it on the ground the same way when it's just Gibbs, because they want to use Gibbs in the passing game as well. So I think they just keep taking hits. Aleem McNeil, Carlton Davis, they just keep taking hits on defense and now a little bit on offense. I do not see the Detroit Lions making the Super Bowl. I would bet a lot of money against it if I could, but you can't now because the Eagles are now the Super Bowl favorites and the favorites over the Lions.
I feel strongly the Lions can't get there. I feel a lot more strongly about them not being able to get there than I do the Bills. I don't think the Bills will because I think their defense is too bad.
I agree.
But I do think there's a better chance for the Bills than the Lions.
Josh Allen gives you a chance. Absolutely.
So, all right.
Real quick before we move to the next game, I have a question for you because I thought about it while we were talking about Kyler, and then I just tweeted it out. Arizona calls up. Let's say no one calls anyone. They get connected by Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell calls. He connects the Giants GM.
That's a weird semantic thing to throw out there, but
yeah, because it's not. I don't want it to be offered by anybody. Roger Goodell, 3-way call, calls up the Giants GM and calls up the Cardinals GM, and he said, "Hey, I have a fun idea to spice up the NFL a little bit. Trade. Arizona, you give the Giants Kyler Murray for the number 1 overall pick, so you can take Shador." Who says no?
Probably the Giants, right?
I don't know. I'm really. It's interesting. It's just I'm trying to get a read on how high people are on Shador.
I guess it depends on what Dable's thought process about Kyler Murray is, but
I guess let's say even if it's the Raiders, same question. Let's say the Raiders get the first pick.
Yeah. The Raiders take Kyler. Shador goes to probably nobody.
Nobody says no, so both sides are happy, you think?
Yeah.
And people are saying,
contract implications aside for Kyler, I'm not sure what that might wreck their cap if they traded him, but yeah.
People are saying Dion would steer Shador away from that. He would stay on the West Coast where they live. He would stay. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. They weren't a bad team. I don't think that they would steer. I get Arizona's not New York.
I think you would if I'm Shador, I would much rather be in Arizona than I would the Giants or the Raiders. That's a great landing spot comparative to the other teams that could potentially have number 1 overall because
he wants to be a Raider. It seems clear.
Yeah. I guess the Raiders have Brock Bowers, and
the Giants have neighbors. So they all have pieces, but I do think the Cardinals are more ready to compete, obviously. So I do think it's an interesting question. I don't even know what the cap dynamics of trading Kyler would be for Arizona, and if that's even really possible with how his contract works, but it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I could probably look that up here, but let's see. Kyler Murray. So he has $63 million in dead cap next year. If it was a trade, it's totally doable. If they traded him, if they traded him before June 1st, it would be $33 million in dead cap. Would save them $12.4 million, which would be greater than the cost of the number 1 overall pick at quarterback, I believe. I haven't looked at the rookie pay scale in a while. So basically, you would get out of the contract, and the first year it would cost you less than what Kyler would have cost you, and then Kyler's off the books, and it's rookie QB deal.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So cap-wise, it'd work, but it'll never happen.
Yeah,
Rodgers not making that call.
Yeah, I don't think it's that crazy of something that could happen if Arizona says we have to move on from something.
Yeah. I was going to look at what does the number 1 overall pick make? 4 years, $39 million is Caleb's deal. So they'd save about $2 million.
Interesting.
So, okay, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to Los Angeles, where the Chargers lose to the Buccaneers 40-17. The Bucs turned it over twice in the first half, but they exploded in the second half. At one point on back-to-back Buccaneers snaps, Mike Evans caught a 57-yard touchdown pass, and then Bucky Irving has a 54-yard touchdown run as Tampa outgains the Chargers 505 yards to 207. The most important thing from this game, Mark, is that Mike Evans is now at 749 yards. I thought the 1,000-yard streak would die with his injury this season, but he suddenly only needs to average 84 yards a game over the final 3 games to get to 1,000. So I ask you, does Mike Evans continue the streak of 1,000-yard games?
What does he need to average again?
84 yards a game over the final 3.
Yeah, he will. He definitely will. That's what Mike Evans lives to do. My take on this game is that the Bucs terrify me, and that I think the Bucs might be like the 3rd best team in the NFC. I really do think they're probably like right behind the Lions, Eagles, and Packers. I think they scare me more than Minnesota. They definitely scare me more than like Washington or the Rams or Seattle. Like, you look at their schedule that they've played this year, and I think they might only just be 8-6 because they had a brutal injury stretch and because they had a brutal schedule this season. Like, I think they're probably more like a 10-4 team. And Bulls has our number, as a commenter just points out in Kev there.
Yeah. I don't want to face them in the playoffs, but I do think the Vikings are the better team.
I'll tell you what, man, I really don't know. I think if those teams played right now, I think it's a really good game. If it's in Tampa, I like Tampa.
It's funny. You mentioned the number of 3-win teams, and it just seems like there's so many bad teams. And I do feel like that's directly correlated with it. Feels like there are so many really good teams this year too. Like, there's not a wide middle of the pack. Like, we're sitting here talking about 4 or 5 NFC teams that are very good, not like just going to backdoor into the playoffs, are very good football teams. And you've got, similar numbers on the AFC side of things. So I do feel like there's not a lot of mediocre teams anymore in the NFL this season. There's a lot of really good teams and there's a lot of really bad teams.
I've just been really impressed by Tampa lately, and I know most of it was beating pretty bad teams. But even before that stretch, they were really banged up, and they went to overtime with the Chiefs. They were banged up, and they lost by 3 to San Fran in a game they were like a 9.5-point underdog in the game. And they kept finding ways to win. And then this week, I really thought that was going to be a close game. I thought the Chargers probably would win the game. And Tampa just blew their doors off. It was close for a while, and they just pulled away. I'm incredibly impressed by Tampa, to the point where next week they play at Dallas Sunday Night Football. They're only a 3.5-point favorite. It's probably my favorite bet of the week. I love Tampa to hammer Dallas in that game.
All right. Well, let's get into the Sunday Night Football game. Green Bay at Seattle. You called this one. Green Bay dominates Seattle 30-13. The Packers defense was dominant. They held Seattle to 208 yards of offense, and they sacked them 7 times. Edgerrin Cooper had 7 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 pressures, and an interception. Huge game for the rookie. Geno Smith left this game with a knee injury and was replaced by Sam Howell, who looked predictably bad. That's a 4-game win streak that got snapped for Seattle. And now they fall behind the Rams in the divisional race. And meanwhile, you've got Green Bay, who has got no shot at the 1 seed. They're 10-4, but all 4 of their losses have come to NFC teams with double-digit wins, in the Lions, the Vikings, and the Eagles. And unfortunately for them, those are the teams they're going to have to beat in the playoffs. but I do think they're capable of doing it. So NFC playoffs are going to be a lot of fun this year.
All 4 were pretty close losses too for Green Bay there. I think they're watching Jordan Love. He might be my favorite outside of the big 4 and outside of Jalen. He's like my favorite quarterback in the NFL. A couple of those throws, people can not Google it, but search it on Twitter. Sicko throw, Jordan Love. Someone does like a sicko throw of the week that he makes. The throw he made to Christian Watson on the sideline is just he's special arm talent guy. I wasn't high on him enough years ago when he came out of the draft. He is. I think outside of the top 4 quarterbacks, the big 4 who are unassailable and Mahomes, Lamar, Allen, Burrow. He's the only guy in the league I would even listen to in a conversation about like Jalen Hurts or blank, because I really do think Jordan Love is right there.
Yeah, Jordan Love is one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch. Like some of the throws he makes are just ridiculous. Like he might, like if you ask me who has the most arm talent in the NFL, I would probably say Jordan Love. And that doesn't mean I think he's the best quarterback, but some of the throws he makes are just ridiculous. Like the different arm angles and the creativity, I guess. The creativity aspect of arm talent is solidly in his core. I'm not saying he can throw a bomb like Josh Allen or something like that, but maybe he can. But that's what always impresses me about his game. He's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he can be a little inaccurate, like sometimes on some short and intermediate routes. And, I take a little bit of that with how insane some of the plays he can make down the field. And he has a little bit Brett Favre in him where he makes some bozo plays every once in a while. Doesn't seem like he does that after like October. It's like once Halloween.
Just get him out early in the year, front load it.
Yeah, once Halloween hits, he's like, all right, I've got my bad decisions out of the way. Now I'm just going to be awesome every week. But Seattle is just not. I actually haven't watched Succession, a show that people tell me to watch, but I do know that you're not serious people. That's how I feel about the Seahawks. You're not serious people. This game was a blowout right away. I don't care if Gino's out there or not. I'm starting to think the Rams win that division.
Yeah. All right, let's get on to the last game. This is Thursday Night Football. The Rams beat the 49ers 12-6. Mark, this was an ugly game. I don't even really want to talk about it much. It just notably, the Rams lead that division now. And like you just said, they're probably the team that emerges from the West. But they're so inconsistent. I mean, fresh off of 44 points against the Bills, they turn in 12 against the 49ers. And it's a divisional game. But this is why I don't take them seriously as like a Super Bowl threat, because I do think they're too inconsistent. They're a team I don't want to face because you do catch those 40-point games, but you catch these games too. So any thoughts or takeaways from this one before we get out of here?
My takeaway might be is just that McVay might be the best coach in the sport. I really don't think this roster is that good. And them sitting there at 8-6, even before last year, I thought that roster had serious problems. And then they lose Aaron Donald, and you go out there and you replace them with some rookies. It wasn't impressive. I don't take the Rams seriously at all when it comes to the playoffs, but I just don't know how McVay keeps doing this. I've kind of always been a Shanahan over McVay guy. I don't know.
It's impressive from a leadership standpoint how he's kept that locker room together through the last couple seasons. And then you just look at the opposite sideline and you see how the 49ers are crumbling at the slightest hints of adversity And I mean, it hasn't been slight, but adversity's hit this season and the 49ers have just crumbled.
Yeah, totally.
Which it's fair to say, the Eagles crumbled last year down the stretch too. And so maybe the 49ers bounce back, next season in the way the Eagles do, but I just don't see it. I think the window is closed on the 49ers because you got to pay Brock now. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going on there. And I just think that era is done for them.
Yeah. I wouldn't pay Purdy if I was them. If I was them, it's not like you're competing for a Super Bowl anymore. So like if you won 12 games this year and lost in the playoffs, you could convince yourself like, oh, we kind of have to, like, can't really replace him. Try to find someone. You found him. Like, yeah. I think you're actually in an interesting spot where you can kind of test it. I think they should just let him go.
Brock Purdy is a right-handed Tua with a little more mobility.
Yeah, and he's impressed me this year relatively to like, I know that people are down on him and people aren't as crazy about him as they were last year, but I actually think when they had some guys out, he impressed me a lot, making some things happen on his own. Having said that, I don't want to pay him $60 million.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely not. They should run from that. So hopefully they don't. But that's going to do it here. Mark, do you have any final thoughts for the people before we put a bow on week 15?
No. Eagles -3 next week. Take it.
All right. There you have it, guys. Thank you for joining us for episode number 182 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr., and we will catch you guys next time.